Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's event, the Bigger Picture Series, Mental Health for Moneymakers, Navigating Mental Health for Entrepreneurs. My name is Jessie Kennedy, and I'm the Program Coordinator here at the John F. Wood Center for Business and Student Enterprise at the University of Guelph. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight for this important discussion. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that the University of Guelph resides in the land of the Between the Lakes Treaty No. 3, the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. This land is a part of the Dish with One Spoon, a covenant between Indigenous nations to live peaceably on the territories of the Great Lakes region. We recognize that this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Inuit, Métis people, and acknowledging them reminds us of our important responsibility to the land where we work and live. As part of Mental Health, Wellbeing, and Awareness Week, the John F. Wood Center is proud to collaborate with the Wellness Department at the University of Guelph and the Business Development Bank of Canada to bring you tonight's Bigger Picture Series event. The purpose of the Bigger Picture Series is to address current trends in entrepreneurship. The topic for tonight is mental health for entrepreneurs. This event has brought together folks from the entrepreneurial community, U of G students, faculty, staff, and community members. Tonight's session will begin with a short video about Chris Coulter, the CEO and founder of the Finish Line Group. Following that, Chris will begin his keynote address and will expand on his story to provide further context about his journey within mental health and entrepreneurship, and will also provide coping strategies for those of you in the audience tonight. This session will then conclude with a panel discussion from Chris, Rebecca Skellhorn, a wellness educator at the University of Guelph, and Mary Ann Wensler-Wiebe, the Vice President of the GTA West Region for the Business Development Bank of Canada. We look forward to hearing them provide their insight on this important topic and sharing resources and tangible next steps for our audience members. A few housekeeping items before we begin. If you're having any technical difficulties, please close the browser and then reopen to start the session. If you click the top right-hand side of your screen, you'll be able to turn on closed captions. If you have any questions throughout the session, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A and our chat team would be happy to respond to them. You're able to submit questions anonymously. And please note that a follow-up email will be sent to all attendees that will be including all of the links to the resources that we discussed tonight. On behalf of the Wood Center, I want to thank everyone for joining us for tonight's session. And at this time, I would like to introduce Rebecca Skellhorn, a wellness educator in the Wellness Education and Promotion Center as part of the Student Wellness Services at the University of Guelph. As a Guelph alumni, Rebecca loves being able to support the well-being of students on campus by working with our peer helpers to create events such as Shine Week, different workshops, resources, and more. Rebecca's area of focus is on mental health and healthy eating, active living, and she's excited to join the panel for this event to share more information about the great services that are available from Student Wellness. Thank you, Rebecca, and I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, Jessie, for that introduction. As we hear today about Chris's story and enter into conversation about mental health this evening, please note that there will be mention of suicide and possibly other mental health concerns that some folks may find triggering. Should you find yourself in need of some support at any point during or after the event, we have a number of different options available for you. For U of G students, we have the Student Support Network, which is a non-judgmental and confidential active listening support for all students. You can connect with the Student Support Network, or SSN, virtually and in person in our JT Powell building right next to the Athletic Center, and all the information is available on our website. We also have the Good to Talk and Here 24/7 helplines, which are available for anybody, and the crisis text line as well. All of the numbers to connect will be shared on the screen right now, so you can see those right now for you. So please make use of them should you need, or message our chat moderators through the Q&A function to be directed further. With that, I would like to turn things over to John London, our moderator for tonight's session. John London has over 30 years of experience managing a wide variety of public and private businesses. His experience includes International Masters of Law degree, partnership at a Toronto Bay Street law firm, senior position at Auto Parts Multinational, co-founder of Public Auto Parts Company, venture capital investing, and CEO and board positions at technology and public pharmaceutical businesses. London's current focus is business and academic board roles, including his roles at the Wood Centre as chair of the advisory board. So thank you, John.
Thanks very much for the introduction, and welcome everyone. I think this is going to be a very interesting and educational evening. Our keynote speaker I have the pleasure of introducing is Chris Coulter. I've known Chris for many years. He's a successful business person, but he's also suffered some loss, and I'm not going to preempt his story because he's going to tell you about that story as we go through the night. But he did suffer a bankruptcy of his first business, and he learned a lot in that process, including that just because you have a great balance sheet doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to get your money out in a tax efficient way. And based on his experiences, he's made one of his goals to coach business owners on how to do those types of things, and he's developed some really interesting and clever strategies to do that. Also, in the course of his life and career, he has very much realized the impact that mental health can have on business success and how it can affect entrepreneurs in particular. And the two of them really run at a collision course in many cases. So Chris became aware that entrepreneurs actually suffer mental health issues at a far greater rate than the average adult person. In fact, it's about twice the rate of mental illness for entrepreneurs compared to regular people. And it made him realize that he wasn't alone, but it also made him realize that he wanted to work to try to help people that were going through the same types of things that he did. And so his current business is the Finish Line Group, which is used to support entrepreneurs' financial, philanthropic, and emotional needs. Chris's why statement remains to openly communicate the lessons learned from my past so that others will thrive in their lives, minimize their setbacks, and lead positive and lasting legacy. So we're about to watch a short video that tells a bit about Chris and his story. In the video, Chris refers to a study going alone, and to better understand the unique pressures that entrepreneurs face, the Business Development Bank, together with CAMH, developed this by including interviewing 500 small and medium-sized business. So a very, very interesting study. And then after the video, we'll hear from Chris. And then, as was mentioned earlier, after that, we'll get into the panel discussion. So thank you, Chris, for sharing your story with us. And we'll now turn to the video.
I guess you can look at success in a number of different ways, right? You can look at it from a monetary perspective. You can look at it from a personal growth perspective. You can look at it from an intellectual perspective. And I think from a character perspective. Our business, when it was flourishing, we had about $5 million in retained earnings. So we were doing well. Everything was going swimmingly. It was an office furniture business. I was sitting on this asset, a business that just continued to grow and grow and grow. And I couldn't duplicate those returns anywhere else. I was married, I had 3 kids. So I was thinking, this is awesome. Running a business isn't that hard. Famous last words.
We're down 1.7%.
Now down 21%
Since the crash of 1987.
in 1929.
Let's go 6.5%.
676 points down. The speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate.
In 2008, our business really took a hit. We ended up putting all of our money into it. My partner and I were really optimistic we could keep it going and things would turn around. And I remember having lunch, I guess it was February 2010. And she looked at me and said, "Are you having fun anymore?" And I went, "No, I haven't for a while." And I said, "Are you?" And she goes, "No." I said, "So why are we doing this?" We ended up closing it down February 2010. So 20 years invested in a business of really a lot of sweat equity, walking away with nothing. So I started with a company doing employee benefits, and then going through the whole licensing process, and I realized all the financial information I had back then wasn't great. And I learned a lot about what I should have done and what we didn't do. I thought, wow, I can actually use this experience from my last business and actually dovetail it into my new business, thinking that there's a lot of business owners who were making the exact same mistakes that I was making, and how do I coach business owners to not make the same mistakes that I did? I started a business called the Finish Line Group. Did well for the first few years, and then in 2015, my 14-year-old daughter was in and out of mental health units at North York General Hospital. She had depression. She was really struggling. And we thought we had turned the corner with her. And in April of 2015, she committed suicide. With Madeline passing away due to depression, it's my whole world that was sort of built on matchsticks to begin with really started to cave in. As a means of helping to deal with it, my ex and I decided, let's become more vocal and advocating for youth mental health. She started up something called the Maddie Project, and she incorporated our two boys into delivering the message to a lot of youth, to high schools, to youth groups, things along that line. It was cathartic for me to actually start writing about some of the ordeals and the challenges and what we went through and experienced with Madeline, how we could coach or share our experiences with what we went through, and hopefully be able to save other lives, or at least send a really important message. Prior to me doing a lot of writing with regards to what we encountered with Madeline, I had acknowledged to myself, which sometimes is the hardest part, that I was suffering from mental illness. And I ended up writing this piece about depression, and it was, why is it so dark even on the sunniest of days? I think that's what I called it. And as soon as I wrote it and I put it on my social media platforms, and it was like push send, and it's like hold your breath, and like, what did I just do? There was a large public outreach, but there was also a lot of sort of personal direct messages that I got from people saying, hey, thank you very much for writing about this. Not enough of us talk about it. We're all conscious of what people think of us, and we don't want people to think negatively. And I guess there's that fear, but from the communication and the response that I got from a lot of people, it honestly was overwhelming. But it also brought to my attention how many other people are suffering. I was pretty consistent about delivering the message after my daughter passed away, and that was an emotional post, and that was something that I didn't want to do it, but I felt I needed to do it, and just really having this outward vulnerability about how I was feeling and about how other people potentially could be feeling as well. And I was pretty consistent for the first year. I posted every month. And then over time, it became less and less. I wasn't sure, what do you keep writing about, right? There's only so many things you can say so many times. I was focusing primarily on youth mental health, especially as it pertained to parents and dealing with their kids. And then I guess it was about a year or so ago, I came across a paper that had been co-produced by the Canadian Mental Health Association and the Business Development Bank of Canada about entrepreneurs and study of entrepreneurs and mental health, and recognized that I'm not the only one that's suffering here. There's a lot of other people. In fact, that twice entrepreneurs, for the most part, suffer depression or mental illness at twice the rate of average adults. But it really shows that no one's immune to it. And I think being able to talk about it candidly and starting a dialogue is really important. One of the other things that came from that study was not a lot of people talk about it. In the business world, you don't want to appear vulnerable and exposed to clients, employees, suppliers, whoever. And in particular, entrepreneurs, whether it's the stigma associated with it or they don't want people to start judging. So what tends to happen is they deal with this stuff on their own. But things like brain fog and productivity dips in what you're capable of doing, there's so many other factors that contribute from a mental health perspective to an entrepreneur. And unfortunately, there's enough of those things that compile on one another that it's a slippery slope. And once one or two of those start compounding, all of a sudden you're looking at someone that's much worse off than they were the week or the month before. A good friend of mine, he runs a really successful market research company, and said point blank to me, said, "Chris, I don't know what it's like to have mental health issues, but I know that there's probably about 30 to 40% of my staff that do." And for him to acknowledge that, and for him, even though he can relate on an intellectual level, but from a humanities standpoint, he feels this is my obligation as an employer, as an entrepreneur, to be able to look out for others. I think there's still a huge relevance to the Finish Line Group from a financial perspective, but also from a mental health perspective. Because ultimately, probably the biggest goal that I want are for entrepreneurs to start loving doing what they're doing again. People start feeling handcuffed, and it becomes more like a job, and it's not a job you can quit. It's a job you're handcuffed to. The Finish Line Group was initially a metaphor for a business owner who, over the course of their career, was looking to create whatever that goal that entrepreneur might have, whether it's retirement or selling their business. Now it takes a little bit of a different spin with the mental health piece. It's about finishing in style, finishing and loving life. Writing about the topics that I've written about, me showing my vulnerability, has been probably the biggest way I've grown. It's really important to be able to be authentic, to be real, and to be vulnerable, because that's really the only way I know how to be now. And to sugarcoat it any other way is just not real.
What an incredible story, and Chris, really looking forward to you diving into your keynote address following this. So to our audience members, just while we're getting the next PowerPoint queued up here, I'm actually going to turn things back over to Rebecca. As I mentioned, this week is the Mental Wellbeing Awareness Week, and we have some incredible resources, and there's a lot of audience members tonight that are University of Guelph faculty, staff, and students. So I'm going to turn things over to Rebecca to highlight some other events and resources that you can take part in, and then we will turn it back over to Chris for his keynote. So Rebecca, I will turn things over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessie. So as Jessie mentioned, this week is Shine Mental Wellbeing Awareness Week at the University of Guelph, which is an event that we put on every semester, run by Student Wellness Services, but in collaboration with campus partners across campus, such as the Wood Center, for events like this. So we are running for the rest of the week still. So if you're interested in this event, come check out some of our other ones. We have free fitness and recreation activities happening every single day. You don't need any extra gym passes or anything like that. We have some social events coming up, like Nintendo Switch games or just like open discussion chats, things like that. We have our featured event of the week is happening tomorrow night, Wednesday night at 5:30, which is our Let's Talk Mental Health panel. So we'll have panelists. We have an undergraduate student, a graduate student, an Ontario Veterinary College student, and a professor who will be speaking about their own mental health journeys and their experiences with that and what has worked for them and things like that. So if you're interested in another panel with a little bit of a different spin, please check that out. All of our events can be found on our wellness.uofguelph.ca website. Just go there and look for the Shine Week website, or you can Google it and it's easy to find there, or find out through our website as well. Our Instagram as well too. Yeah, I think that is everything. If you have any questions about Shine Week, feel free to toss them in the Q&A and I'm happy to answer them for you.
Awesome. Thanks, Rebecca. Maybe we'll just wait in 2 more minutes here. Do you want to mention the awesome resource of Shine Packs at the U of G?
Yes, absolutely. So Shine Packs are a free virtual care package that any U of G student, staff, or faculty can send to another one or another person on campus. Or if you're, an off-campus community member and you know somebody who works or studies at the University of Guelph, you are you're welcome to send those as well. So they include some self-care activities, some like little bingo cards, some really nice positive messages, and resources for our campus specifically. So if you're interested in sending one of those to somebody, you're welcome to email us as many names as you would like. Our email is shinepack@uoguelph.ca, and you can send those to us and we will pass those along anonymously throughout the week and let somebody know that you care about them.
Great, thank you so much. I did send a few of those Shine Packs out, and some staff members reached out and asked if it was me that sent them, so they got them. There's some amazing resources that they can access, and it's just a great event that is put on by the Wellness Department. All right. So at this time, Chris, let me know, do you want me to share the PowerPoint for you? Just wait one moment here. A lot of different tech that we've all had to learn throughout these past 18 months. So just bear with us here while we get set up kind of for Chris's keynote address, and then we will continue with the rest of the events. I do have yours queued up, Chris. Do you want me to share it for you there? Sounds good? Okay, perfect. So I will turn things over to Chris, and then tonight we are proud to have him as our keynote speaker. All right, Chris, and I'm turning it over to you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Coulter. Welcome to this emotional roller coaster ride called life and being an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur can be one of the most rewarding and liberating things that you can do as a career. Equally valid, being an entrepreneur can be one of the most frustrating and emotional roles that you can choose to make a living. Schools are great at teaching you how to succeed when starting a new business, but do these schools properly prepare entrepreneurs if their companies fail? The fact is, almost 40% of new businesses fail within the first 5 years, and 57% of startups fail within the first 10 years. Don't worry, this is not a presentation trying to discourage you from being an entrepreneur, but more about preparing you for the entrepreneurial journey. Our schools do a pretty good job of preparing us for the successes of running our own businesses, but I think they need to do a better job of preparing you for some of the setbacks and challenges that you'll face along the way. So you've heard a lot of the details of my entrepreneur life from my video interview. What we're discussing today is relevant whether you run or eventually want to run your own business, but also many of these principles apply if you work for a corporation. Being an entrepreneur makes us more susceptible to mental health challenges. When we lost our daughter, my ex-wife and I said, we can go about this two different ways. We could choose to keep it private, or we could share our experiences and that hopefully something positive might come of our tragic loss. Nicole, as mentioned, started the Maddie Project and has raised over $3 million for youth mental health initiatives. I've written extensively about our experiences with Maddie and what we went through, and I'm approached often by parents who sometimes just want to share their experiences with their own teens. The outreach has been overwhelming. So my efforts talking about entrepreneurial mental health is starting to get some great traction, which is exciting because most entrepreneurs don't want to discuss mental health challenges. So when I was first approached about making this presentation, I was when I first saw the Business Development Bank of Canada report, I was shocked and felt like, wow, I'm not the only business owner going through this. That's when I decided that no one is talking about this, but they should be. Maybe this is where my path was destined to take me. The reality is, in this post-COVID world, businesses are facing huge uncertainty right now. A number of businesses will not be in business a year from now. Our concern over finances are at an all-time high. Our mental health is more fragile than ever before. And yet talking about mental health amongst entrepreneurs is rarely touched upon. So there were a lot of different directions that I could have taken this presentation. But in the end, I thought highlighting the things that I've learned along my entrepreneurial journey that could help future entrepreneurs would probably be the most beneficial to all of you. So here we go. 11 coping strategies for entrepreneurs and mental health. Managing expectations. So as an entrepreneur, optimism is an essential trait. It rallies your employees, investors, customers, but not when it comes at the sacrifice of reality. This is your baby, and no one wants it to be more successful than you. Sometimes you have all these factors that are working against you. Most entrepreneurs underestimate how long it will take to start generating enough cash flow to be self-sufficient. The single largest stressor for entrepreneurs is managing financial pressures. Number 2, passion drives behavior. So in one breath, I'm telling you to manage your expectations, and in the next one, I'm telling you to be passionate about what you do. So if you are lukewarm about something, it will only yield mediocre results. You require the ultimate conviction to get you through setbacks and challenges. Here's the thing. Passion breeds passion. Passion sells. Passion drives conviction. Passion convinces a customer to buy your product. Passion motivates an employee to take a complete flyer on a startup venture. Passion turns your employees into raving fans and huge promoters of your company. Remember this quote by Mark Anthony: "If you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life." The key is to love what you do more. The key is to love what you do more days than you don't. Because you will have those days where you question, what have you got yourself into? You've probably heard a number of your profs talking about the importance of mentorship. It's important to have a mentor or mentors, but it's also important to mentor others. School will teach you the essentials, but a mentor will lend invaluable real-world insights, help you navigate obstacles, and help you reach your outcomes when facing adversity. Many peer advisory groups can fulfill the same function within your entrepreneurial world. Many peer groups consist of business owners or executives who have summited some of the many obstacles you'll be facing along your entrepreneurial journey. They are happy to help you navigate some of the hurdles they may have faced early on in their careers. Equally important is being a mentor. You'll hear me talk about giving back later in my presentation. Coach and assist others on their road to success. Sometimes it's not a clear mentor relationship. I've had a number of individuals that have worked for me in the past that have come up to me over the years and tell me how much they've learned from me, or that they mirrored their management style after how I coached them or how I built relationships. Those poor people. Some will argue that there's no such thing as work-life balance. Some will say that it's all about work-life choice. Well, here's a visual that will hopefully make some sense. So I'm a huge fan of Tony Robbins, and Tony Robbins talks about the wheel of life and focusing on your categories of improvement. Some of those categories will likely be family, physical health, friendships, finances, work, personal development, community. You've likely seen this in your own lives. The areas that get the attention get the desired results. And whatever gets ignored gets unsavory results. As you can see from this illustration, metaphorically, if this wheel is your life and those areas are not in sync, you are in for a very bumpy ride. So identify those areas that are important to you and make sure you spend time on all of them. Once one of these areas gets off the rails, sometimes it's not always easy to fix. It is said that exercise is probably the greatest antidepressant you can use to ward off mental health challenges. But being mindful of your mental health can also help with your all-around state of mind. We've all felt the effect. We've all felt the stress building up and experience. Going out for a walk or a run can help to clear your head and bring your brain back into focus. The same can be said about practicing mindfulness. I'm still guilty of this today, but when I practice meditation or getting into a feeling of gratitude, I tend to sleep better, I feel better. It helps to ward off episodes of depression or anxiety. Something else, more than 50% of entrepreneurs are affected by brain fog. And brain fog is real. And I'm sure many of you have probably experienced it before and weren't certain what it was. So this is how I define brain fog. When you sit down with the noblest of intentions to get work done, but regardless of how hard you try, you're unable to accomplish anywhere close to the amount of output that you expected for no apparent reason. Well, there's a lot of contributing factors to brain fog: diet, exercise, alcohol consumption, sleep patterns, your environment, your physical environment, stress. I believe Jessie has said she was going to send out a follow-up email at the end of the webinar. There's a link about ways to eradicate brain fog and getting back to being super productive again that I've asked Jesse to include. And that's a free ebook download that's available to you. Number 6, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. This is a phrase that I coined a couple of years ago. There are a number of things about being an entrepreneur that creates uneasiness. That being said, there's a good time and a bad time to venture out on your own. It's better when you don't have a number of encumbrances going on in your life, financial and family obligations. Not everyone has the stomach and mental wherewithal for being an entrepreneur, and that's okay. There's a lot of stress you'll face and resiliency that you'll need. Make sure you don't set yourself up to fail out of the gate. And that being said, failure is part of the process. I'm not talking only about the failure that sees you crashing in a sea of flames. You will make mistakes, and that's okay. Use these mistakes as lessons and hope that they won't prove to be too expensive or time consuming. This is all part of the process. It will help to teach you resiliency, resourcefulness, and character. Every mistake builds muscle to help you grow and get through that next obstacle you face. Most importantly, don't mistake optimism for stupidity. Remember the network of resources you have available to you. In all likeliness, they've probably experienced a similar problem to what you're experiencing right now. Leverage your mentors, your business associates, and peer advisory groups. This will make the heavy lifting a lot lighter in the future. Being nimble. Nimble by definition means quick and light in movement, moving with ease, agile. Don't become a slave to your business because you've limited yourself to options. You don't want to feel the constant pressure from the bank, investors, customers, employees, suppliers. This pressure will stifle your energy, your passion, and your creativity. Try to ensure you always have plenty of options. Remember, only having one option is not an option. Number 9, vulnerability is not a weakness. Remember that asking for help shows strength of character. Trying to deal with all these pressures on your own will only put you into a state of overwhelm and make you do circles inside your own head. Know the people that want you to succeed and want to help you get there, and don't be afraid to leverage these contacts. In all likeliness, some of the most successful entrepreneurs you've heard about utilized a network of mentors to help them to get to where they are today. You may be able to get there on your own eventually, but you'll get there a lot quicker if you ask for help. Don't let your ego get in the way of admitting that you don't have all the answers. Number 10, build strong cash reserves within your business. The greatest contributor to overwhelm and stress for entrepreneurs is worrying about financials. Investing into creditor-protected, guaranteed financial assets will help you become financially self-sufficient. The bank is not your business partner, and the sooner you can, and the sooner you can become less dependent upon the bank, the stronger your balance sheet will become. Give back, build your brand, and feel amazing. This isn't something that I realized until much later on in life. It feels incredible to support a cause that you're passionate about. Rallying around a cause is a huge morale booster. Yes, it can also give you a huge tax credit. People don't realize that it costs a lot less than you think to make a difference to a charity. Rallying your business behind a charitable cause is good for building your corporate brand, good for business, and good for the soul. Giving cash or writing a check is the least efficient way of contributing to a charity. Remember that there's a right way and a wrong way to make a charitable impact. You can make a huge difference for only pennies on the dollar to a charitable cause that you rally behind. Doing good for others is good for the soul, especially when you can make such a huge difference for less than you would think. So in conclusion, I will leave you with these final words. Being an entrepreneur will give you some of the most rewarding and challenging days of your life. Celebrate the wins and learn from the losses. Love what you do more days than you don't. Smile often. Cry in the company of those you trust. Tell your story to at least one person every day with enthusiasm and passion. Only you decide where the line in the sand is drawn. Remember that no one wants this more than you. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Chris. That is an amazing story. And of course, congratulations on what you're doing, but the courage that you show to share with others what you've been through, and in particular, your loss of Madeline, and the fact that you're turning that in a way that is going to help others is really quite incredible. So thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Thanks, John.
At this time, we're going to welcome back Rebecca, and I'd like to formally introduce Marianne Wensler Wiebe, who's one of our panelists for the session tonight. So Marianne looks after the GTA West area of the Business Development Bank of Canada. And in this role, she leads a team of professionals that are dedicated to servicing Canadian businesses through financing, venture capital, and advisory services, with a focus on small and medium-sized entrepreneurs. In addition, she's the regional sponsor for Ontario Women Entrepreneurs, and she currently sits on the board of directors for the Mississauga Board of Trade and One Spark Foundation Board. And before joining BDC, she spent a number of years working in commercial banking in the Windsor area. And Marianne is a former director of St. Joe's Hospital Foundation in London and board of governors of the Grand River Hospital Foundation. She sat on various committees supporting entrepreneurs and automotive growth in Ontario and Canada. So we're very fortunate to have her. Marianne, thank you so much for joining us. And so Marianne, we might as well start with you. So we have a question. And our first question is really one, the inclusion of BDC in a survey that was done with CAMH is a little bit unusual, I would suggest. I usually think of banks as organizations that are lending money and doing things financial, as opposed to thinking about mental health. So can you share with us a little bit about how that happened? What was the thinking that went into that?
Thanks, John. Yeah, absolutely. It is odd, right, to have a bank commission a study on mental health. But let me give you a brief background. So BDC is Canada's bank for entrepreneurs. To put it simply, BDC wants entrepreneurs to grow and succeed. So our mission is to make Canadian entrepreneurs the most competitive in the world. Now, small and medium-sized businesses are drivers of our economy. They account for 90% of the country's private sector jobs. They support 4.5 million households and contribute $1 trillion to Canada's GDP every year. So it is critical entrepreneurs are healthy in order to reach their full potential. Now, early on, we realized that entrepreneurs' success relied on more than just financing and advice. Okay, that's what you get when you deal with a bank. Success was driven by their overall well-being, and for entrepreneurs to succeed, we needed to start taking mental health more seriously. Now, we had anecdotal evidence that business owners experienced higher levels of stress than non-entrepreneurs, but there was no well-documented research available in Canada. And that is when, in 2019, we partnered with CAMH for a first of its kind research initiative that focuses on entrepreneurs' mental health, the title was called Going It Alone. Now, through that study, we learned a number of things. I'll just focus on the highlights, but Chris, you shared a lot of them. Thank you very much as well. But 62% of entrepreneurs, so 62% feel depressed at least once a week. Entrepreneurs who are female or whose enterprises are growth or in early stages or have fewer employees are more likely to report mental health issues. And here's another one, nearly half say that mental health issues interfere with their ability to work. So it was critical that we understood more about this. So this study gave us a greater understanding in order to help entrepreneurs improve their well-being. And that was the foundation of where we started to where we're at today. So thanks.
Very interesting. So what you're really saying, cutting through all the words here, is that you've decided that business success and mental health are inextricably tied together.
Precisely.
Okay.
Yeah. And you know, the reality is, you know, so many entrepreneurs are isolated, you know, like that they take on that pressure of going it alone, you know, like that, and don't know where to turn or have that discussion. And one of the other things is we shared the study, you know, like that, but we work with our employees to be able to have those conversations as well. So that's awesome. Thank you.
Okay. No, thanks. I mean, I can vouch for the fact that being an entrepreneur can be a very lonely existence. And Chris alluded to that, to make sure that you've got mentors and advisory groups and so on that you surround yourself with. So let's turn the focus over to Rebecca for a moment. So when we talk about support for entrepreneurs and students, people often think, okay, we're talking about counseling. But I get the impression that really what's available through your department is something significantly more than that, Rebecca. So I was wondering if you could just talk briefly about what's available, not only at the University of Guelph, but also available in the community.
Absolutely. So I would like to start with saying that counseling is a super valid way of getting mental health support. Tons of people go that route. And if you are seeking a counselor, amazing, incredible. But I know that there's also a lot of folks who think like, I am not struggling enough to see a counselor. Like other folks have it worse than me. So I'm not like, I don't fit the criteria to see a counselor. And there's no such thing as criteria to see a counselor. I know folks who see counselors when they're on their best day, because it's never a bad time to check in about your mental health. There's other folks who, of course, deal with the stigma of saying, I'm going to see a counselor and what that means in the community. Some folks might find it inaccessible to find somebody in their area. It might not be affordable. They might not be available at the timing that you're looking for. So it's important to know that there are lots of other different opportunities to get support for your mental health outside of a traditional counseling setting. So at the University of Guelph and Student Wellness Services, we do offer that more traditional counseling, both booked appointments and drop-in emergency counseling. We also offer a number of different therapy groups and skill building groups. So if you'd prefer to get support from other folks who are experiencing similar things, that's an option as well. We also offer a number of peer-to-peer supports. So I mentioned at the top of the event about the Student Support Network, which is a confidential, non-judgmental, active listening support. So someone just to check in and talk to you when you've had a bad day. And have somebody just to share things with. So that's really a great option. We also have a number of other peer mentorship programs at the University of Guelph, like our U-Shine program, which helps build well-being and through goal setting. We have our Griffins Empowered by Movement program, which helps support students with anxiety and depression through adding physical activity into their daily life. So different things like that. We have our text and call support lines that I also mentioned at the top, including one that I didn't mention, which is for international students called Keep Me Safe. And that can be accessed in a number of different languages 24/7, so that if you're in a different time zone, you can still connect with some supports. We have some folks called student wellness navigators who will help you figure out all of those different things and figure out a pathway, because it is a lot of options. There's way more things than I even mentioned that a lot of students don't know about. So you can make an appointment with one of our folks who can help you figure things out. As for our community members, there's equally as many options out there. So there are, as I mentioned, lots of traditional counselors. We have lots of different types of therapy and group support through supports like the Homewood Health Center. We have those text and call lines are available to anybody as well. You're not restricted to university students. So Here 24/7 is a really great resource that's available 24/7, specifically for Waterloo and Wellington regions, and that will help connect you to support specific to our area. The Canadian Mental Health Association facilitates that and also has lots of different options as well. There's also a website called Connects Ontario, which can help you find resources in your area, whatever that might be. And there's lots of free online self-help programs as well, such as the Bounce Back program. So you can, take a Google through, find all those different things. If you're getting lost, I would say start with the Canadian Mental Health Association website, and then you can usually find all the supports and resources through there.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot of resources that are out there, but I guess it seems to me that one of the issues, which you alluded to, Rebecca, is do people really feel that they need the resources? Do they feel that they have crossed that threshold where this is something that they need to explore? So maybe I can ask Chris. Chris, as you were going through what you've been through, when did you come to the conclusion? What was it that made you realize all of a sudden, I'm not okay? I can't deal with this on my own. I need help. And how did you go about that process? Because it seems to me that's a critical pivot point in all of this.
You're right, John. Yeah, there's not that there's a usual or unusual way that one gets afflicted with mental health challenges, but I think my situation was probably a little bit different. In our first business, we had success for 15 years, and it's not that we didn't make mistakes, but we were incredibly fortunate in that we were profitable for pretty much all of them. And then all of a sudden the financial crisis of 2008 had hit, and we went from only experiencing upward growth to all of a sudden seeing catastrophic losses. I don't know if you remember at the time, but around the beginning or midway through 2008, the Canadian dollar was actually higher than the US dollar. And we had some major US suppliers, and just in that 2-week period, we went from, we took a 30-cent swing favoring the US dollar. That swing in currency represented a $400,000 loss to our business. So then I kind of realized this is real, and it was we watched our retained earnings and our capital get decimated. The banks, we were in one of those high risk industries. People weren't hiring people, let alone outfitting their offices. So the banks had us on their watch list. It was one of those things that, as much as those facts in the news upset you, your staff, and we had upwards of 70 employees, they look at the leadership of the company as the barometer for how things are going. And in our situation, it was really difficult. My partner and I, we knew the reality of the situation, but it was tough to get out of bed some days. And knowing what we were going to face, I had to paint this smile on my face so the staff would not feel threatened, wouldn't feel like they were like their jobs were in jeopardy. So that was probably where I started going, wow, you know what, I need some help to be able to navigate this. So it became harder and harder for me to get out of bed, and I didn't want to alert my wife and kids, because you know what, it wasn't their mess. So I guess that's when I realized I need help, and I sought out the assistance and counsel of a psychiatrist.
Okay. That's quite interesting, Chris, and obviously a very difficult decision for you. I'm going to throw back at Rebecca with a follow-up question along that same line. So Rebecca, if someone is a student at the university and they're not sure whether they're suffering from a mental health issue or not, in other words, they're just not sure whether they've crossed that threshold, where do they go in a low-key, non-judgmental way to have a chat with somebody to try to make that conclusion as to whether they really need some of those services that you talked about, or whether they're just undergoing the usual problems that a typical university student goes under? Because let's face it, we all understand those pressures.
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest, if a student is having those thoughts, come and see us, right? Like the typical things that a student goes through, the stresses of midterms and exams and trying to do group projects and all of those different things, they are hard. Being a university student is hard, regardless of any mental health conditions that you may have or have diagnosed or are pending diagnosis, whatever. So anybody can use our supports. Like I said, there's no criteria. If you're having a thought that maybe I should see someone and maybe get some help, I don't know what that means, come on back. Come check us out, right? So I mentioned the Student Support Network. They are non-judgmental active listening support, and they know about all of our services as well. So you can literally come and talk to somebody who's another student just like you, who understands what you're going through, and they can help you kind of figure things out and help you identify, what are the feelings that I'm going through? Is it something maybe more serious and I'm not realizing it yet? So that's a really great resource, as well as our student wellness navigators who can help you identify the programs that might be beneficial, whether there's something a little bit more casual, like a mindfulness event that we have coming up, or some more formalized supports.
Interesting. So in other words, you're saying that if you're thinking about, do you qualify, you probably qualify.
Exactly.
Okay, that's great, Rebecca. Thanks. Just moving on to another topic, which is the definition of success, because we all know that when you're in university, success is defined in a fairly narrow way. You're totally focused on your academics, you're totally focused on your marks, you're totally focused on, getting your degree in 4 or 5 years. But I think we've all learned that success can mean a bunch of different things, and that maybe we should have a more balanced view of what success is, rather than one that's unifocused on how we're doing academically. So can you comment on how students define success, or how they should do it, but particularly whether you see any change in the way people are thinking of their definition of success for themselves as we've gone through the pandemic?
Yeah, so I think that the pandemic has forced us all to think about, what are the things that are actually important to me? What matters to me? What do I want to commit my time towards? What are the things that get me out of bed when I have nothing else to do because I can't go outside and see my friends? It's a lockdown. So I think it has definitely forced us all to kind of reevaluate things and what does matter to us. At the same time, a lot of students are still living in that, I am at home, I am and doing my online classes, and that is all that I have going on right now. And so grades are a really big focus for them and are a really big indicator for their success. And I've talked to a lot of students that come into student wellness about they're feeling more stress and anxiety than ever and less motivation than ever. And so they're benchmarking themselves against their pre-pandemic successes. And I think that is unfair to yourself to do, right? We have gone through a lot of trauma as a society through this pandemic. And so looking at how you were before the pandemic and how much you studied and what your grades were, I don't think is going to be a fair assessment of your actual skills outside of the classroom. You have all learned a lot of things about yourself, about what it is to be human, have connected in new and innovative ways, have learned new ways to do things, and have gone through some really, really tough times. So I think it's important to acknowledge that all of those things are successes, and you will have so many other successes that have come out of this time and that you will have in the future. That if you are experiencing a sense of failure or anything like that, I want you to know that you are not a failure. You may be experiencing failure, but you will be learning from those failures to become a better person, have more success in the future, and finding the right path for you through those failures and those successes so that you can find the right fit and where you're meant to be down the road.
Okay, well, that's great. Thanks. Well, Mary Ann, I'm going to ask really the same question of you, and that you're out in the business world. Your clients are small to medium-sized businesses, entrepreneurs, so they're no longer in the academic world. But how are they thinking of success, and is their definition of success evolving given what's happened over the last 18 months with the pandemic?
Yeah, really good question, really good conversation. Rebecca, I just made note when you talked in terms of benchmarking yourself to your pre-pandemic self, how unfair it is spot on, in that case. And, so as a banker, people anticipate that when I talk about success, it's going to be in terms of numbers and dollars. And of course, those are important KPIs, but they're not the only measure of success either, right? So I'm going to talk first a little bit about myself and BDC, and then, how that kind of relates to the entrepreneurs that we work with as well. So one of the things that we worked really hard at is being a good place to work is a cornerstone of BDC success. And so as a leader, and my colleagues and I work closely together to deliver, and I'm going to draw on Chris's second point, on our passion for entrepreneurship as well, to create synergies to help our clients, and help our employees with their own employee experience. So it's March 12th of 2020, and we became a fintech overnight. We sent every employee home with their laptop and said, you're not coming in. And, and to be honest with you, for many of us, we thought, oh, this is a few weeks and then we'll be back, never thinking that we're still not back in the office, at this particular stage. And, having to work in that virtual environment, and watching our employees homeschool and look after their kids, and still it was crazy. Now, for many of our employees, though, success was leveraging the number of initiatives around helping clients. So success for our clients, many businesses had to completely change their business model. Like that. So yeah, their bottom line, their revenues were hit. But for many, that meant working with businesses that wanted to start, let's say, e-commerce programs, develop e-commerce strategies to sell online, like that. Other companies, they were, developing tech strategies or tech investments to help them get through the worst of the pandemic. Like maybe it was automating some processes. So again, it wasn't necessarily a revenue model, like that, but rather changing their business model to cope and just, hang on, until, we got to the next part. Many businesses had to revamp their supply chain. Their supply chains evaporated overnight and things like that. So have our clients shifted their definition of success in the last 18 months? Absolutely. All right. There was that sentiment of just survive, you know, like that. And many didn't, and that's heart rate wrenching. But they went from just surviving to almost thriving, you know. So they struggled, you know, but they took the opportunity to reinvent themselves and added non-financial KPIs, all right, to measure as well, right? You know, and rethinking what success truly looks like. So it's interesting. One thing that came out of COVID we're seeing is sustainability. ESG is so important now to so many businesses, or a buy local theme where we never experienced that before as well. So yeah, everybody's redefined. I think the pandemic has been a level setting experience for all of us and redefining what's important. Back to you, John.
No, thank you very much. That's a great answer. So Chris, one of the things that you talked about was you realized that your business wasn't doing well. And I think that you and your partner probably decided that from a financial point of view, it made sense to close it. And yet you got a whole bunch of people looking at you and counting on you and in your employees. You've got peers that are looking at you, and you're probably thinking at that stage of the game that you're not the success that they perhaps thought you were. So there's a whole lot of outside pressure from people and peers and so on. So how did you manage to navigate your way through that pressure to make what was the right business decision?
Well, for us, I guess no one wants to admit that you failed, but for us, it really wasn't about ego. It was, I guess, when you have employees and true employees, and it's not only your employees, but their extended family. So we had 70 employees, probably looking at with spouses and children. We had 200 lives that we were responsible for. And that probably took precedent more so than anything else. I think if my partner and I, if those lives weren't hanging in the balance, we probably would have made the decision we ultimately made a lot sooner and probably walked away with a lot more money. But that wasn't the case. But honestly, the hardest conversation I think that I had to have was with my wife, and letting her know that we had failed, because that meant ultimately we collectively as a family were compromised, and I felt like I had let them down. So it wasn't outside pressure and what they thought of us closing our business. Ultimately, I was thinking probably more about first my family, and then secondly the employees.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to throw off my moderator's hat for a moment here and make a comment that, in my view, having been in business for the better part of 35 years, the one thing that I think is critically important is, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, don't forget who you are. And by that, I mean who you are before you started your business. You know, we all tend to identify ourselves with what we do for a living, but I would say that about 80% of the people that I went to school with, through their careers, they had some, failure isn't the right word, but they either had an entrepreneurial instinct that didn't go well. They were terminated from their employment for some reason. The business that they were working for failed. And the people that got through that the best were those that weren't 100% tied in their identity to what it is that they did for a living. They understood who they were, and whether that was they were fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, basketball players, musicians, but they hadn't lost who they were before they got into the business world. And I think that's critically important. Those people that forget that, they tend to struggle, in my experience. So I think we're getting close to running out of time here. Is that correct?
Thanks, John, for checking in. We've still got a few minutes, so maybe we can kind of go through the last few minutes and we can go a few minutes over time if that's okay with the audience members.
Okay. So let's go back to Marianne. We talked about the study and the statistics in the study, and and I gather that there's been an updated study, or at least some sort of study, in the midst of or post-COVID, and I'm just curious as to whether the results were different and what you have read into those latest stats, because of course COVID is very much on everyone's mind now.
Absolutely. We did go back, again, knowing that, non-entrepreneurs' mental health versus non-entrepreneurs was significantly different. So we did survey again 3 times over the course of the pandemic as well. And really, overlaying that, you have very little control over the COVID-19 situation and the pressure that it put on entrepreneurs. So again, to echo something Chris had pointed out as well in his presentation. So in March of 2021, so a full year into it, the top 3 sources of stress were cash flow, the impact of the pandemic on expenses, and keeping the business afloat. Even a year later, nobody was out of the woods just yet. And business owners were worried really around generating enough revenue to cover their expenses and payroll as well. Entrepreneurs were more worried about the health impact of COVID on their family and employees in March of 2021 versus the 6 months or so before in the fall. So it was, in about August 2020, 36%. It rose to 42% as the Delta variant was coming out, and concerns around that. The other stat, the increased reported increase in loneliness and isolation, had increased substantially. But what almost doubled too was the stress over the ability to raise capital. Now it's getting real. Like that we're into it a long time. We're going to have, financial reporting, and we're going to need more patient capital, and we're concerned about that as well. We also saw barriers. Sorry, I'm going to just go back. Who was affected? It was women-owned businesses, and not surprising. There's a lot of smaller businesses or retail. Like that. Visible minorities as well struggled more along that. But what came out of the interim studies as well through the pandemic was the top barriers still were around social stigma. People weren't going to get help over the social stigma, or the costs, or third, access. So men were more concerned about social stigma. Women were prevented because of the cost of that. So now the one good thing is, compared to our 2019, more people in these surveys were identifying and saying, my mental health and my well-being are something critical that I need to pay attention to.
Okay, oh, that's great, thanks. And Chris, just a quick question. We talked a little bit about employees in the context of a business that you were forced to ultimately close, and we've talked a lot about mental health for entrepreneurs themselves, but entrepreneurs inevitably have a bunch of people that are working for them. So do you have any thoughts or advice on how entrepreneurs that are running organizations should be treating and managing the staff that are underneath them, the managers, the supervisors, about mental health and how that needs to become a priority in their organization?
That's a great question, John. I believe that entrepreneurs need to create a safe environment for their employees to be able to openly speak up, whether they're experiencing mental health challenges or not. Unfortunately, it's a slippery slope, because I believe that people have to, in order to open up, have to feel comfortable. They have to feel safe. And if all these measures have been incongruent up until now, and all of a sudden the business owner says, okay, starting tomorrow, we are having a mental health day, or we want everyone to open up and talk about their mental health issues, it's got to be consistent with the leadership. And I think it also needs to be embraced from the top down. It's not something I believe you can just delegate to an employee and say, okay, manage our mental health committee. It's got to be embraced, and it's got to be, you need to empower people to do it, but it really needs to have a belief from the top down.
Okay, thanks, Chris. That's very valuable. Okay, I think we are at the end of our time, so I would like to thank everybody today for attending and participating. I hope that you've learned something. The things that I'm taking away are, first of all, that there's an awful lot of resources out there that are available for you if you're struggling at all, or even if you're not sure that you're struggling. So please make sure to take advantage of those, and also be alert to others who you may see that are struggling, and make sure that you can help them get guided to the appropriate resources. And I think this is a fairly complex issue, so I don't mean to trivialize it, but I hope you have understood a little bit better some of the complexities of it, some of the unique challenges that entrepreneurs face, and most importantly, I hope that you all walk away knowing that you're not alone in this. So thank you everyone for attending. And on behalf of the Wood Center, I'd like to thank our panelists, Marianne and Rebecca, for sharing their expertise and knowledge with our audience, and certainly to Chris, our keynote speaker, who's been through some really, really challenging experiences, and he's now using it to help the advancement and the importance of this topic for the community. So you're really an inspiration to people. So thank you very much, Chris. And we note that all attendees will be getting a follow-up email after the event outlining the supports and resources that were shared tonight. And I'd like to thank you again for our wonderful panelists, our keynote speaker, and we've sent a small token of our appreciation to each panelist and have made a donation to the Maddie Project.
Awesome.
Thank you for all of the important messages you shared tonight. So everyone have a good night, and take good care of yourself.
Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.